event. My name is Dio Gunyemi. I'm the president of Global Lawyers of Canada, Calgary. GSC is a national professional association that seeks to promote a diverse and competitive legal market in Canada by representing and supporting internationally trained and globally minded lawyers through advocacy, community engagement, and professional development. Today, I'm very glad to welcome you to the event themed The Ethical Application Process, Post-Pandemic Changes. The event will address issues regarding securing an ethical position during the pandemic and in a post-pandemic world. It will also address remote ethical interviewing tips, the pandemic's impact on the recruitment process, and tips for ITLs to succeed in the new normal, and practical networking tips post-pandemic. I want to welcome our outstanding speakers and panelists. We're grateful to you for accepting our invitations. I also want to welcome and introduce you to the moderator, Chi Elia Ndule. Chi is an internationally trained lawyer and an associate at the Calgary office of Norton Rose Fulbright, Canada LLP. Prior to joining Norton Rose, she, as an articling student, Ms. Elia Ndule completed portions of our articles with the Environmental Law Center, Alberta, and a law firm in Calgary. She practices corporate and commercial law with a focus on energy and environmental matters and mergers and acquisitions. She received a law degree from Olabisi Onabanjo University in Nigeria in 2009 and was admitted to the Nigerian Bar in 2010. She received a Master's of Laws from the University of Calgary in 2016 and was admitted to the Alberta Bar in 2017. She is a founding member and director at Calgary Black Chambers. Before I hand over to the moderator, I would like to announce the GLC NCA Scholarship Guide, NCA Guide Scholarship Scheme. 10 of our members who are in Alberta will benefit from this scholarship scheme. Please check our website and social media platforms for more information about this scholarship. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I want to welcome you all and look forward to a wonderful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dio. So as Dio mentioned, I'm the moderator for the session, and my name is Chi, and I'll introduce the panelists. I'll just go in the order of my screen. And so first we have Kenneth Ilochong, a really good friend of mine. Kenneth is also the first Black bencher elected to the Law Society of Alberta. So congratulations again, Kenneth. He's a legal counsel with Parkland, and he's one of the directors of Global Lawyers of Canada as well. Kenneth is an international trained lawyer. He also completed his composite articles with DLA Piper and Imperial Oil and was admitted to the Alberta Bar in 2017. He joined Blake's afterwards before moving to his current role. Kenny got his law degree from Nigeria in 1997 and was admitted to the Nigerian Bar in 2000. He also has a Master's of Laws in Information Technology and Telecommunications from University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, Scotland. He volunteers he's very particular about the way you introduce his LLM, so I got that right. He volunteers with CCDC, and he's a very active mentor for law students. Welcome, Kenny. Next, we have Kimberly Hall. She's the National Director, Professional Recruiting at the Calgary office of BLG. She's been responsible for student recruitment and programs in the Calgary office since 2015. She works closely with members of the student committee. She also works with the talent acquisition national team. Before joining BLG, Kim worked as the assistant career advisor at U of C, Faculty of Law, which is when I first met Kim. And she's worked as a project manager for a digital company and business development coordinator for a mid-sized law firm. Kim loves working with students, I can attest to that, and with assisting them in their individual professional development. She received her Bachelor's of Arts from the University of Calgary in 1989. Just want to say welcome, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Next, we have Kimberly Grange. She's the Director of Talent Recruitment and Student Development in Dentons. She oversees all aspects of their terminal student program. She's also responsible for lateral associate recruitment in the Toronto office and is also leading the development of the Canadian region's student recruitment strategy. Kimberly works closely with senior leadership and the wider talent team to develop initiatives that further the firm's commitment to an inclusive culture and ensures the firm is a workplace of choice for excellent and exceptional talent. Prior to joining Denton's, Kim worked in similar roles in other leading national and international firms. She's a regular speaker on panels at law schools and professional association conferences. She received the JD from Queen's University in 2013 and was admitted to the Ontario Bar in 2014. She also has a Master's of Arts from the University of Toronto. Welcome, Kim. Next, we have Gabrielle Monia. She's Senior Manager, Professional Development and Student Recruitment at the Calgary office of Blake's. She's responsible for managing student recruitment and Associate Professional Development programs in the Calgary office. Gabrielle is also involved in law school recruitment activities, interviewing students and performance reviews and mentoring. Prior to joining Blake's, Gabrielle submitted an article at a large national law firm where she practiced as a litigation associate before moving to a Calgary litigation boutique firm. She received her JD from the University of Calgary in 2013 and was admitted to Alberta Bar in 2014. She also holds a Master's of Arts and a Bachelor of Arts in English from University of Calgary. Welcome, Gabrielle. Finally, but definitely not the least, we have Shaun Smith. She's currently a licensing candidate from the Law Society of Ontario and an articling student at Mercedes-Benz Financial Services Canada. She's an international trained lawyer as well. She was called to the Nigerian bar and has over 6 years of experience in civil litigation, international arbitration, and corporate commercial transactions across various industries. She had to complete her NCAs. She was assessed with 5 exams, and due to her background from a common law jurisdiction, and she completed all 5 exams in one sitting. Welcome, Shaun. So thank you, everyone. And so we're just going to go right into it. And if anyone has any questions, you can please type it in the chat and we'll get to it right after our questions. So the first question, I'm going to throw my questions to all the panelists, so just feel free to chime in. First, we'll talk about securing articling positions in the middle of a pandemic or post-pandemic, because securing articles is hard enough as it is. And how can we, or participants, navigate it now that we're in the middle of a pandemic? Okay, anyone?
I can start. I think for many of the candidates, I think it's important, and I want to stress the importance of the networking. And I know it's difficult, and I know for students in particular, it's really hard to do the ask. But I want to encourage everybody on this call to don't hesitate to reach out and have conversations. And I think that is the start of looking and seeking for opportunity. And once you have a conversation with one person, ask if they have any recommendations for you to have additional conversations with other contacts that they have in the profession. And it just is that spider web approach in terms of being able to have as many conversations as you can, get to know the industry, get to know the market, and getting some recognition for you as a candidate and a qualified candidate. And I think that's the first important start to seeking an articling position.
So I think I'll jump in on that, if that's okay. I totally agree with Kim, the importance of networking. And I think that when we kind of, even going back a little bit, how you approach kind of looking for an articling job will depend on your timing, where you are in the NCA process, and even kind of means through which you want to or will be applying. So even thinking about through perhaps a formal recruitment cycle or looking for something that might be off cycle. So starting kind of, as soon as you are able to enter the licensing stream. I think in both of those cases, it's really the timing of eligibility for entering into a licensing stream, irrespective of the province in which you're looking to get qualified, is really important. And so knowing what that timing will be. In all cases, I think, like Kim said, networking is a key piece. And I think how you network may also, there's different ways to go about it. So, if you're still at an introductory phase, kind of figuring out differences between markets, early on in your in your kind of research piece, attending such things like open houses, networking events like this, fantastic to get an overview and a sense of different kind of ways in which those markets are operating. coffee chats, but particularly when off cycle, one of the things that will be really important is those individual discussions with lawyers in the area in which you are interested in working. Oftentimes set up in a context of saying, I'm interested in expanding my network and knowing more about it. And through that, you can indicate that you're looking for an articling position. But I find that one of the most things is, or a really important thing is setting up a broad network. And that's important not only to your articling role, but in terms of continued success as you proceed through the bar.
Thank you.
Okay. When I answer these questions, I try to be a little more practical because I was in that boat. Okay, so for those listening, if you just take out your pen and paper, I'll just give you a list of things and we can move on from there, because you might hear everything you want to hear, but you really want to know what to do. So first things first, find law firms that practice in your relevant area. Not everyone practices everything, and you, when students or when people seeking articles are desperate, they think they want to do everything. You can't want to be a criminal lawyer, want to be a family lawyer, want to be an immigration lawyer. Be specific with what you want to practice. So find law firms in that relevant practice area. Understand the law firm's philosophy or practice needs, and I'll tell you why later. Find the name of the recruiting manager. Small firms, it might just be the office manager. So you have Kimberly Hall, Gabby here, Kimberly Grange here. Find the name of the recruiter, and I'll tell you why later. Craft your cover letter to be relevant to the position you're seeking. Never use one cover letter for everything. In my foolish days, I actually once wrote to Blake's and had, I think, DLA Piper, the recruiter for DLA Piper, like, you know, where you're just doing the same thing over and over again, it could get tricky, having to change it every time. So you need to be deliberate and be very careful. So that's your cover letter. And your cover letter has to tell your story. Make yourself memorable. I'm going to say this again later in the discussion. And then craft your resume as well. So if in the past you practiced corporate commercial and you now want to practice family, highlight your family experience and don't just go talking about corporate commercial, because you need to be able to bring something to the firm. And if you're talking corporate commercial and the firm is a family law firm, it just might not gel. And finally, reach out to your recruiter, either on LinkedIn or give the person a phone call. These are all humans. You see the humans on the call. They're not people behind a wall that you cannot speak to or see. Reach out to them, try and develop a relationship, a personal connection with that recruiter. Trust me, that recruiter would remember you, because recruiters get a lot of resumes and cover letters. If you can make yourself stand out by just having that personal connection with the recruiter, you've already scaled a hurdle. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabby, do you have anything to add?
No, I think things have been covered really well by everybody. And just when you're building your network, don't think it all has to be cold calls. You may find a connection unexpectedly. I know recently I was chatting with a foreign trained lawyer who I met through someone I articled with, and he had met her at his church, right? So you never know where you might have that connection where you can chat with someone. And I know for me, and I'm probably for Kim and Kimberly too, while we might not always have positions open, we'll have a coffee with you and chat to you just about the legal market. Like, we know that it's hard to figure out who does what and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, if you email me right now in the middle of the formal one, I'll recruit and say, hey, Gabby, you want to have a virtual coffee? I'm gonna be like, I'm so sorry, I can't. But if you catch me at the right time, it's, you know, I'm going to be more than happy just to chat, even if we aren't hiring for articling at the time. I'm going to be more than happy to at least chat with you about, you know, the Calgary legal market or whatever, right? So don't be shy about just saying, hey, you know, are you looking? If you're not looking, can I pick your brain? And a lot of time you're going to get a really positive response to that.
Thank you. Sheo, I know you just I think you just started articling in January, right? So
Exactly.
what do you have to?
So, I mean, everybody has pretty much said a lot, almost everything. But then as someone who's just fresh out of that space, I feel like I should also chime in to say that, I mean, network, do the applications and all, but then to be a bit more practical, to say that, to manage expectations, to say that, networking might not always or immediately provide the result or produce the results that informed your decision to network, even though you don't show up at the networking spaces to say, hey, I need an article, right? But then we all know, right, as lawyers, internationally trained lawyers, hoping to get called, that the purpose, the objective, the bigger objective for us is to hopefully find an opportunity to advance our career. And so it might not always, and I remember hearing this over and over, and after a while it wasn't producing results, because I searched for articles for about a year or over a year, and it became discouraging. So I'd just like to put it out there to say that even when your networking efforts don't immediately or connectedly yield the results that you want, you are building yourself, you're learning. I remember saying to a couple of people that when I had those coffee mates, I mean, before the pandemic, even when I knew that nothing was going to come out of it immediately, right? The fact that, I'd heard something new, I'd met somebody new, and, like Kenneth said, these people are humans, whether they're recruiting managers or just senior associates within a practice. They're human beings. You have a fresh and, intriguing human connection with another human being. And I remember saying to people that I'd rather do this than go for, faceless interviews or send out applications and not get a response. The feeling of walking out of a chat, walking out of a coffee mate with someone who's better positioned and, hopefully more knowledgeable about the process than you are, is entirely more rewarding than, sitting behind your computer and pushing out those applications, to places where you have no human connection. So absolutely, it might be discouraging because, I mean, you might not get off from a coffee meeting into your office space, to immediately resume articles, but keep at it, because a lot is being added to you, right? And that's on the face of networking. I'd also like to speak to applications, because I got my articling opportunity by just applying. It wasn't from any of my coffee chats or virtual meets. It was just a random post I saw, on LinkedIn, and I decided to apply for. And, like Kenneth said, so yeah, please keep applying. I mean, there was a bit of pause, there was a time, just at the start of the pandemic and shortly into the pandemic, when there was a lot of instability, uncertainty, who's recruiting, who's not recruiting, right? But I think everybody is, settling into this new normal now. Organizations, firms are recruiting, right? Look out for these applications, find some good judgment to determine or decide what amount of time and effort you'll put into sending out those faceless applications, and what amount of time you'll invest into networking and establishing real human connections. Because I really just applied, and like Kenneth said, please pay attention to your resume, to your cover letter, and not make that mistake of addressing something to that you'd sent out to another firm to so absolutely, I mean, I believe those those are the things I'd like to add to the conversation.
Thank you, that was awesome. And just like I hear certain things being repeated, and it just networking, everyone talks about the importance of networking, so let's remember networking is key. Just keep going at it. I also heard off cycles. I think it's important that the recruiting in Canada, they usually have a period when they're doing it. If you reach out to a talent, if you reach out to Kimberly or Kim when they're actually recruiting for an articling position or a summer 1L, you're not going to get a response. And for me, it also almost seems like you didn't do your homework. They're really busy at that time, and so they're not going to get back to you. Besides the fact that they shouldn't get back to you at that time, because it's almost like it's going to be partial then, because they've spoken to someone who they may have to hire, right? So you need to pay attention to the cycle period. Then also re-qualification. When I first came here, I thought I could just apply without having my NCAs done. So I know Kimberly Grange spoke to that process, where you are in your NCA process is important. You can't apply before you do it, but I don't think you should. I think you should let them see that you're ready to go now, just in case they have a vacancy now, right? So pay attention to that as well. And then connection, like Sharon talked about, you need to try to make the physical connections, and you also have to keep sending out your application. Okay, so thanks a lot for that. That was practical to me too. And so next question, I think we should talk about remote interviews. So that's the new normal. Like, I can imagine how scary that will be. Do you have tips on do's and don'ts for remote interviews? And anyone can go.
I've got a couple. We've got a few. We've done these a few now. And one thing, a couple just practical tips. First of all the firms are going to be using different software. We're on Zoom, for example, today. Some firms use Teams. If the software has an app, download the app, because your connection will be better and you will have better functionality than if you just log in through the web link. So practical tip number one. And if you can, try to do a call with the software with a friend or something, just to double check that it does work properly before your interview. As far as headset goes, I've heard students who are very nervous about what type of headset, headphones, or whatever should I be using. Listen, we have seen everything. So whatever gives you a clear sound so you can hear and we can hear you, whatever. I don't care if you've got Beats by Dre, if you've got no headset like me, whatever. I don't care if it's huge, I don't care if it's tiny. As long as you can hear and we can hear, that's all we care about. Students get hung up on how awkward it is, right? Like there's weird silences, you're talking over each other. Do not lose any sleep over that, and do not worry about it, because it happens so often and we're so used to it that we don't even notice it anymore. So don't, students have a lot of stress about interviews. They're a big deal. Don't add unnecessary stress on things like that. As far as dress goes, I know some students get a full suit. I can tell you right now that Kim and I are not in a full suit right now. So whatever gives you comfort. I know I've spoken to some students where they just feel more professional and feel like they're going to perform better if they've got the full thing on. And then some, like myself, are like, I am more comfortable in my leggings, whatever, I can wear them. So do what works for you that way. But do make sure at least top up, you've got some professional attire on. I love a good graphic t-shirt, but not in an interview. I think those are some like kind of general tips, but overall you still want to be the base of the interview. Answering questions from the interviewer, putting yourself in the best light, are still the same. Different firms do interviews differently. Some firms are still using like a fit interview, where they're just going to ask you random questions about yourself, kind of whatever strikes them, very unstructured. Other firms have moved to a standardized behavioral interview type interview, where they have a certain set of questions that they're asking, their behavioral interview questions, and there's a specific way you should be answering them. If you don't know how to answer those questions, Google does. So take the time to prepare and know how to answer a behavioral interview question. But basically what you want to be doing is, they'll ask you a situation about, a time you failed, a time you solved a problem, whatever. So think about what skills they're looking for in an articling student and lawyer, and then you tell an anecdote about when you did that thing, and make sure you finish off saying what you took away or how you would apply that to the position at the firm or something like that. A lot of students kind of forget that last piece. Just really know what skills you need to be a successful lawyer, which if you're already a lawyer, you know what it takes to be a lawyer, and make sure you're prepared to highlight those skills in your interview.
Thank you. Hi, Kim, did you want to go?
Yeah, sure. If I could add to, because Gabby is bang on in terms of all of the tips, and we've had the benefit in Calgary to have gone through 2L Recruit, so we've been able to adjust scenarios, and we've seen it all. And for students, you get so anxious through all of this, but I just want to reassure everybody that we will adapt. We will be flexible. If you're having internet connections or the Wi-Fi is not working, then we can make arrangements with you to meet at another time, or when we can solve that problem. We can even conduct interviews over the telephone if we need to. So just take a collective deep breath if things are not working the way that you would like them to work. And I know for some students, you're in a situation where you're in your dorm room, or you're in school and you've got the bed in the back and that sort of thing. But try and see if you can somehow pick a neutral wall. If you can, try and remove some distractions that you've got. We interviewed a student that had an overhead fan going, and I could not concentrate on the student because all I could see was the fan. And just ground yourself. So if you've got a chair that swivels, just plant your feet and ground yourself, and then think about too how you want to be presented. Even just camera angles are really important. I had a student who interviewed with us using an iPad, but the iPad was laying flat on the ground or on the table, and so the angle was tough because you just saw the top part of their face. So just really thinking about trying to emulate as much as possible the real situation in terms of an interview. So camera, looking at your interviewers, and we've all adjusted really well to this sort of new normal. So we've all adjusted very well to the virtual platform. And I think for many candidates, it's actually leveled the playing field significantly in terms of us just having a good dialogue, asking good questions, and research is king for students. So I just want you to know the importance of being able to understand the firms that you're recruiting with. To Kenny's point, it's like really know what we do, and research is of paramount importance. So just some additional practical tips in that sense.
Okay, Kimberly, do you have anything to add? And I can move to the next question.
I'll just add a couple quick points. We had the benefit of doing remote interviews during the Articling Recruit in November. And some of the feedback that I got from the candidates and participants through that process was they actually preferred interviewing remotely, because it did provide, for a number of them, they were able to interview from a space that they were incredibly comfortable from their home. I think in all cases, do your best to plan ahead in terms of where you are going to interview. For some people, it may be stressful depending on if you're sharing space with others, if you have kids, and all of that is totally fair. I think all you can do is certainly do your best to try and get some space in terms of, where you will be quiet, letting others know, and, provide the upfront kind of during the interview, say, I apologize in advance if, somebody comes through. Our student committee chair had his dog throw up on their chute during the interview. So things are going to happen. But I think it's about kind of acknowledging up front, but more than that, even being flexible and adaptable throughout the interview process. And part of that is particularly important because you're going to be dealing with technology where things may go awry. And the most important thing in that is you don't want to let it throw you in terms of your performance. So to kind of go in as much as possible prepared, and then also be prepared to move if you have a situation where you're fortunate to have multiple interviews or be moving between interviews, to be prepared for different styles of interviews, to the point that Gabby was mentioning earlier, and know how you're going to present the message that you want within those circumstances. One thing that really came up during the articling recruitment for structured interviews is that sometimes, particularly if you're researching in advance, you might anticipate a question, but make sure you're really listening to the question that is asked, and that you are pulling from your experience and able to provide examples to answer that question, because that's one of the pitfalls, I think, potentially for candidates as they do go through more structured interviews. So really take your time, and it's okay to say, what, that's a great question. Let me, as I consider that, give me a sec, and then go into the actual question. And the last piece I'll say for interviews, in all cases, prepare. Know your resume, know your experience. If you have a deal sheet, if you have practiced for several years, know what kind of, the roles you held on files, the work that you've done, and be able to kind of recall all of that information, and also prepare in terms of your research of that particular firm and knowing the questions that you want to ask. So all of that is going to be, the same whether remote or not, but hopefully you're able to do it within a space that is actually more comfortable for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll just move on real quick to the next question. Now, this is about the onboarding process. So it's hard enough becoming a new student and working in the office, and then having to do this from home. Can you tell us like what to expect and how effective is the onboarding process for new students, considering that everyone's working from home now?
So this one is something that I think we've actually gotten pretty good at. It's a little weird and awkward at first. It is a little bit harder to meet people, but I think everyone also knows that the students are coming in without that face-to-face contact. So I find, at least for us, our lawyers, our mentors, both assigned and unassigned, are kind of going out of their way to connect with the students when they come in, whether summer students or articling students. So people are being a bit more intentional, whereas before the pandemic, when everyone's in the office, there was a lot of, you just run into people, or you just walk to someone's office and you just check in. So what I'm finding is working for us is we're making sure we structure it a bit better. For example, when my summer students start, I have a weekly meeting scheduled with them in their calendar, so they know they always have a chance to connect with me, and they know that when that's going to be. This last summer, it ended up for about a month, they wanted to see me every week, and then they were like, Gabby, we don't need to see you every week. So I stopped going to that meeting, but they met as a group without me. So they didn't want my mom energy there anymore, I guess. But so they still met with each other, but then I kept that space free in my calendar so that if they needed me, I was ready to jump in if they had questions. And then there was one like later in the summer where they had some questions. So So I think as far as the technology goes, we have the technology for everyone to be working remotely. So that is pretty smooth, I would say, at least at the larger firms. I don't know if it's the same at some of the smaller shops, but at least for us, we have the resources, and some of the large clients too. We have the resources for everybody to be working pretty smoothly from home if they choose to. But that personal connection is the question, right? Because it is such a big shift when you're coming into a law firm as a student. I think that's where somebody who's an internationally trained lawyer who's already worked as a lawyer maybe has a bit of a leg up, because you are a bit less confused about kind of the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. You've done these things before. It may have been in a different jurisdiction with slightly different laws, but you've drafted an agreement before, you've drafted pleadings before, so you have like an idea of the mechanics that maybe a student who hasn't worked as a lawyer before doesn't have. But that personal connection is where people have to be a bit more intentional. So we've tried to do that and set that up, but then it's also the students have to make sure they're not being shy about reaching out, right? I think that's everyone's worried about taking up too much of somebody's time or being a nuisance, but you get in your own way with that, and you really have to not hesitate to reach out and say, hey, can we have a phone call? Can we have a video call? I really need to check in on this.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that, Gabby. And I think from our perspectives, the importance of any of our student programs is to lay a foundation for the students to get comfortable. And what does that mean? It's making sure that you've got the proper training, the proper onboarding, you've got mentorship, which is key. And I think it's all about relationship building. And so being, like Gabby said, intentional and mindful. And, through our summer student program and student programs over the last few months, I've tried to make sure that we're building those bridges. And so, students are meeting new practitioners every single week, and it's, formalized in that sense. And then we encourage students to continue building those relationships, reaching out. Every single lawyer within our offices are more than willing to have a conversation with the student. So it's really just, again, you've already networked in order to secure your articling positions, and it does not change when you come in firm. So I would encourage you to continue to be entrepreneurial in that sense, and really be mindful of the areas that you'd like to grow in, and be intentional in terms of asking for those sort of meetups or conversations. Everybody is willing to spend time with a student. So so don't be afraid, like be confident coming in firm, despite not having maybe the advantage of summering at a firm. But when you come back in article, it does not take you long to get up to speed, and it does not take you long to build those relationships, and everybody's very encouraging.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If I could just chime in as someone who's been newly onboarded virtually, I'd agree, completely with Kim and Gabby. I think that, there's a very impressive mastery of that process from your perspective, from, the HR and all of that, the firms. And I mean, I found it seamless. I almost didn't notice that I wasn't going into the office, physically. There was no gap. I think that there was no gap. There was no need that, I had a reason to believe was occasioned because it was the virtual onboarding process. And, like both of you ladies have said, everybody's aware what, the situation in the world is. And so everybody, I believe, is generally a bit more nicer, a bit more welcoming, a bit more accommodating, right? And I'm convinced that the bulk of the responsibility now is on, us, the people on this other side of the divide, right? The students and the, the newly or the articling students, to, specifically to internationally trained lawyers. I think that for the bulk of us, we come from cultures that, do not particularly encourage being, maybe not being confident, but being in people's faces and asking. And, we're quick to think that it be interpreted as, being burdensome or bothering, right? But I've seen, as we should also have appreciated with networking, if we're practicing and, practicing how to network, that, in this culture, it is not, you must really be tactless and doing it, overboard for that to be interpreted as being burdensome or being unnecessarily clingy. So absolutely reach out. If I ever felt a void, it might not even be a mail, it might just be a quick instant message, and that has come. Even telephone calls, personal, text messages, everybody has done so well to close up that void. It's been seamless, except of course, as Gabby said, just that personal relationship with that bumping into someone in the office and all of that. But that aside, it's been almost beyond belief. All right, it's been impressive.
Great. Okay, I have a few more questions, but I see I've gotten lots of questions from the participants. So I'll just do a quick shift. We have a question here, and please feel free to, any of the panelists can answer as well. There's a question here about applying for a summer student position, even though you're eligible for articles. For example, like say you have gone through the NCA process and you can't get articles, and you're prepared to apply for a summer student position. Will that work, or is that frowned upon?
So Kim, do you want to take this, or do you?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I guess it depends on, how the firm's plan is, that we when we normally hire within our summer student pool for articling. So for an example, the Calgary market is going through our first year recruit right now. And depending on what that student pool looks like, we're planning for what 2023 would look like. And so we're planning 2 years in advance. So, if you're anxious to want to start articling, you need to be thoughtful in terms of what recruit you want to participate in, and understanding we recognize that the firms are involved in these formal recruits. It's one opportunity for you to get in the door and meet some of the firms. So I guess you need to be mindful of which recruit you want to participate in. Knowing that first year recruit, you're not necessarily articling until 2023 unless the firm is flexible enough to be able to have you continue on. But that's generally not how we plan per se. And then, but with that, the articling recruit does occur in June of every year. So then you're looking at a 1 year ahead sort of look, and whether or not you're prepared to do that. So I guess it's up to the individual candidate whether or not you want to participate, knowing that the firms, that's how our thinking is in terms of planning, and being mindful of that. And you know, and I know a lot of firms will definitely look at candidates outside the formal recruit process, but it's not often, and not all firms participate in the articling recruit. So it's really a way and a strategy for you to think about, like, what firms you want to recruit with, and if that's to your advantage to be able to sort of get in the door through that process, then go into it with the full intention of participating and planning ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly what Kim said. So like right now, so for the timing, and I know I saw a question too, so I'll at least outline the Alberta timing. Different jurisdictions might have different timings. So in Alberta, from about mid-January until the end of the holiday week in February is the 1L recruit. So we're seeking 1L summer students who are going to article, not the next summer, but the summer after, right? So they're going to summer this summer, then they're going to, the next summer, they'll do whatever they decide to do, and then they'll come article. So 2 years in advance. Then in June, there's an articling recruit where we are seeking students to article the following summer. And then in the fall, September, October is the 2L recruit where we're seeking 2L summer students who are going to summer the next summer and then article the following summer. So if you are someone who has already finished law school, whether you've been practiced or not, the timing doesn't line up with what we're looking for at that time generally. And each firm will do things differently. You know, you may not have a lot of success if you're off cycle that way, because we are looking for a specific timing, like we're building our articling classes in advance typically. So in the articling recruit, if you have your NCA certificate, put it in your application package. I see a lot of applicants who've already completed NCA, and like they say it in their cover letter maybe, but they don't include the certificate, or they just make me guess where they are at in the NCA process, and that doesn't help anyone. So if you have completed it and you have that certificate, stick that thing in your application package. So if you've completed it, then you're eligible for an articling position, so you could article at any time. There's nothing stopping you from putting your application in for the summer student positions. Maybe you get lucky because somebody's looking for somebody to start right away and they're interested in your application and you get a position that way. It's unlikely. And I think for most firms, because they are looking specifically for summer students who are then going to article a year or two in the future, it's unlikely they're going to pick you up as a summer student when you're already ready to article. It's unlikely. That said, though, when I get applications from internationally trained lawyers for the summer student process, it's not like I remember their names and blacklist them because they applied to the wrong process. So I don't think there's a big downside to submitting your application. Worst case scenario, the recruiter's just going to read it and go, this isn't what I'm looking for right now. But you're not going to be like on some list we circulate of people who applied to the wrong process. So don't lose too much sleep over it. And in the rare cases where somebody just the timing happens to line up and they need somebody right away and they see you're ready to go and they like your resume, you could hit the jackpot that way, so to speak. I think where internationally trained lawyers who have completed their NCA and are ready to article have a bit of a good time to apply, at least in the Calgary market, is if you check in about March, April, and you're ready to article, and my business needs have changed so that my class is too small and I need some more people and all the recruits are over. If you catch me at that time, you might be in luck, right? So I would say kind of March, April is when we might be looking at things to see if maybe we need somebody else. So, and I wouldn't just send in a resume cold, I would do the email where you say, hey, I'm an internationally trained lawyer. I'm looking for an articling position. You know, if you have a space, I would love to send my application. If you don't, can we have a chat about being a lawyer in Calgary or whatever, right? So at least you're going to get a chat out of me. So, and another time you might want to check in is, again, because that articling recruit is in June, and then we go in, at least in Calgary, to the 2L recruit in September, October, and I'm onboarding new students all summer. So I'm not thinking about my articling class the following year. But November, December, again, I might be thinking about, ooh, as somebody just told me they're clerking and I'm down somebody and I need somebody else. I have definitely done off-cycle recruitments like that. So you can sometimes, again, luck out at that sort of timing. Now, if you are currently in school at a non-Canadian school and your degree is in process, you can apply for the summer student positions. But often we know there's a big question mark about how long NCA is. And again, because we are building our class a few years out and we have a timeline we're working on, it's going to be harder for me to hire a student whose degree is in progress when I don't know when they're actually going to be ready to article. And I don't have necessarily, like if you're applying for a first year summer position and you're in the first year of your 3-year degree at in another country, I know the NCA might take, you know, up to another year depending on things are. So it's just so far in the future for me that I can't commit to offering someone an article that far in the future, right? Because it's hard to plan that many years out. Okay.
Thank you. I was wondering whether, like, Gabby spoke to Calgary market. I'm not sure if we can speak to the cycles in Toronto. Are they typically the same?
So slightly different, but largely, I would say our first year recruit, it typically happens in January, February usually. It's a little bit different this year because of the pandemic. The second year recruit typically happens in the fall. So applications would be due towards the end of August with on-campus interviews I blanked there, September, October, and interim interviews in November. And the articling recruit would typically happen in the summer as well, June, July, August. So fairly aligned in terms of those pieces.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe I should move on to the next question. And this has to do with requirements for articling. Can we just like do a really quick chat about what someone asked, like guidance on requirements of articling and the NCAs? Can we just speak to that really quickly?
In terms of the question for the articling requirements, I'm not sure I know exactly what or the best way to answer it. I mean, in terms of articling within the Law Society of Ontario, it would be a 10-month process. You need to have gone through your NCA accreditation in advance of applying to that process. And so they will make an assessment in terms of the number of exams or potentially courses that you may need to do depending on your legal education internationally and the work that you've also done. So that typically, you know, in anyone kind of applying, I guess the first stage of reference would be to reach out or go online to the NCA website and also check the articling requirements for the specific province that you're considering kind of looking for licensing. And I'm not sure if I answered the question or if, what it was getting at. So I apologize and happy to answer any follow-up from that perspective.
No, I think you did, because I was going to say this question is not really like it's going to be online to find it. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what it is, right? Like you go to the website, confirm how many exams you need to do those exams, and then you apply. So I think thank you, Kimberly. I think that's pretty much it. And we had a quick question about potential questions. Like if we can just speak to a few so we can move to the next question. Just like what kind of questions are asked like during the articling interview? I know some people wonder whether they get like technical legal questions because they are lawyers from another country, or whether it's just going to be like you set the standard type of questions. Can you just speak to this a little bit?
So I'm happy to jump in on that. The type of questions I think that you're going to get will also depend on how or where you're interviewing. So the different types of questions might be situational, behavioral. There may be specific legal type questions or more kind of conversational type interviews, which would be, you know, based on perhaps your resume, interests, different experiences and such. If you were applying to certain government roles, or even perhaps, well, yeah, I'll just say certain government roles, there are typically more legal type questions or a kind of a content-based piece to the interview. So you will need to prepare differently for that particular interview. From a situational or behavioral type question interview, it would be anything from how you've responded or reacted in a particular situation. So, you know, can you tell me about a time, sorry, this would actually be behavioral in terms of a past experience. So could you tell me about a time where you faced a particular challenge that you had to overcome? Can you tell me about a time when you worked with a team towards a common goal? So those are really behavioral type questions. Situationals are more based on to respond in how you will act in a particular moment. So, you know, they might give you a bit of a scenario and then they ask you to kind of walk you through the particular thinking. I think those ones are probably less so common within the legal industry. And certainly with what I've seen lately in terms of the shift, in terms of recruitment, generally speaking, you will most likely from a law firm perspective, see more behavioral type questions or quasi-behavioral type questions.
Thank you. Does any other panelists want to speak to that?
I can add a little bit to that too, in terms of questions and really understanding sort of who you're interviewing with and the firms that you're interviewing with as well. So you can get specific. I encourage all students to sort of dig a little bit deeper than sort of the pages of our website, really understanding who's interviewing you, the practitioners involved, what are their practice areas, have they published, are they recognized by any sort of legal directories, getting a good sense of that and just asking them questions about their practice. And you know, I've seen lawyers love to talk about, you know, their own practice and their progression and their trajectory. So taking an interest in your interviewers is always really helpful. And then getting specific about the firm. It's like, I see that you're moving into these industries, or you've like starting to make headway in this area. And can you talk a little bit more about where you see the firm is going? Is there new areas that the firm is looking at? So really get specific and really thinking about sort of understanding the differences between the firms and where we're recognized in all of the different areas. So do your research again with regards to that.
Thank you. Sean, I was wondering what did you want to add anything?
I was going to say that, you know, just speaking to the type of interview questions, I was going to say that, you know, I got behavioral questions just like Kimberly had described. But then what I found also helpful was that Mercedes-Benz had, you know, included very important, very useful details in the email that invited me for the interview. So I had, you know, I had a heads up, we're going to ask you behavioral questions, please prepare. I had a heads up on, you know, the members of the panel, you know, so that helped me with my research. And then with that, I mean, I've heard the ladies speak to researching, right? With the kind of email I got that mentioned, and everybody might not get that kind of email. I don't know what the practice is with, you know, other firms or organizations, but I'm speaking from, you know, my experience, at least the one that yielded articles, right, for me. And that, you know, mentioned the panel, the names of the panelists, and then that really helped me to be very pointed and focused with my research. So if you have that kind of heads up, you want to go all out with your digging, with your research. And I find as well, I mean, just to add before, you know, I mute my mic, I find as well that the quality and the amount of research that you do in preparation for your interview would speak almost directly or proportionately to the, you know, amount of confidence and the level at which your real, you know, personality is able to shine and come through. Because, you know, like we say, I mean, again, I had to speak to internationally trained lawyers because I'm one. A lot of us have years of experience. For a lot of us, the deal is not, you know, it's not that we're confused or we don't know what to do. I mean, take out the context of different jurisdictions, but then you realize that we come into interviews because it's a different jurisdiction. For some of us, we've never had legal work experience in this jurisdiction, and then we just cower and you know, just get dull, your personality cannot shine through, your confidence, is hampered, you're not speaking as intelligently as you really are, maybe, right? But I find that if you prepare, the quality of preparation, the quality of research, the fact that you wake up the morning of your interview and you say to yourself, there's absolutely no question that I'm going to get asked today that I won't be able to speak to in my capacity as someone who self-proclaims to have practiced law somewhere on the face of the earth for X number of years. I find that if you're able to get your mind, your head, yourself into that space, you shine. And I also need to say that for internationally trained lawyers, recruiters, law firms, Canadian law firms, Canadian organizations also want to hire shining, very bright candidates. It's not, I don't believe, there might be those issues, but I don't believe that it really is, a protest against keeping internationally trained lawyers out. What I find, and I might be wrong, is that, we don't shine as much as we really, we don't come up at the interview to our highest potential. We don't somehow present that. It might be a cultural issue, it might be a pressure issue, but whatever it is, I believe that, good quality research, preparation, and whatever other thing that you need to do personally that can bring you into your superstar mode, right? Just before the interview, works wonders. I think works wonders.
I'm sorry, we're running out of time, but I have 2 questions that people really want answered. So if I can just plead with the panelists to just give us a few more minutes. One question is about when you're navigating like in an ADICLIN interview and you also plan to apply for ADICLIN exemption, do you want to mention that? So I know international trained lawyers, you can apply for an exemption from ADICLIN, which like in the Calgary market at the very least, you need to have articles first before you can apply. Is that something you want to mention in the ADICLIN interview?
So I might be able to speak to that because I said earlier that I searched for articles for about a year, so I was already considering applying for exemption. I know that in Ontario, you can get a full exemption, complete exemption from articles if you have a prerequisite number of years of experience in a common law jurisdiction. So absolutely, if I got the question right, you can almost like burn both ends of the candle, until you're already, completely locked in. For instance, your exemption application has been approved, right? At that point, I'm not sure that you can keep applying for articles. But, if you want to harm, your dedication to either option, it might be something that you consider to say, or maybe give yourself a timeline to say, I'll apply up until this, and if not, I probably get exempted. But yes, you can have both, in consideration. Kim, does that sound about good?
I would say, I think the questions really should one be honest about their intentions.
Especially in Calgary, where you have to like, I know that, that's fine. Like in Toronto, you can actually get articles complete exemption before you get your articles.
Mm-hmm.
But in Calgary, before you even apply for an exemption, you need to have articles. And so they're asking, should you be, nobody can say you should be dishonest, but will it hurt your application or your interview process if you say, I intend to apply for an exemption down the line? And just to follow up on that is, what's your view on getting the complete exemption from ADICLIN as against hiring someone as an associate straight up with no ADICLIN experience, or hiring someone who has gone through the ADICLIN process? You can also speak to that, and then we're done. Just not to take time. Okay.
I would say that be honest about it. Calgary, for one, is a small market. Big firms have a very structured process. They want you for 12 months. If you leave 6 months in, it messes up their whole process. So for big firms, it's a no-no. You must be honest about it. For smaller firms, it's about the honesty. If your firm wants to hire you for 6 months only, and you want to do 3 months, let them know that you want to do that. Because it's a small market, like I said, what gets out, and if you're seen to be one not to be honest, what gets out very easily. So that's what I was saying about that.
Gabby or Kim, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think in all cases, or in most cases, hopefully this is the basis of a relationship, and that you are hoping to kind of stay on beyond your articles and practice within that particular firm. So I think that the honesty piece is important. Within, I guess, one kind of situation that I might throw out that's different from perhaps a larger firm situation would be sometimes if you were applying to smaller firms, part of a discussion about what you are eligible for from either an exemption or even an abridgment of articles might be part of the discussion about what, you know, value proposition or value add you can bring in terms of your particular situation. So if it was a smaller firm who perhaps didn't want to take on as much of the financial kind of piece of, you know, hiring a student in that particular way, you may say that, you know, I could get an abridgment. I anticipate I will only need about 3 months to complete my articles. That may be a discussion that you want to have in terms of your relationship and what you're hoping to achieve with that particular firm. So I think part of it depends, again, going back to an original piece or a question of, are you hoping to just article to be licensed and then you want to do something else? Are you hoping to work within that particular organization for a longer period of time? And part of that can be a discussion and an individual discussion that's also reflective or incorporates your experience. Because again, if you have also practiced for several years abroad and are coming through a different, you know, and coming through and are looking to get licensed and then practice within that firm, it's going to be, you are at a different stage than a student who has just completed their legal education and coming through the program. So those individual conversations, I think, can happen, but they do require that kind of upfront honesty that Kene and you know, and mentioned.
Perfect, thank you. And so just to the second piece of the question about like is there, would you hire an articlant, a student, an associate? Because I know you all deal with associate recruitment as well. So an associate who has gotten exempted completely and has not technically worked in the Canadian market is again someone who is articled, even if it's for 4 months or 3 months and got an abridgment. Like how do you see those?
So that's a different recruit in terms of, that would be a lateral associate recruit. And again, that would depend on the specific business needs within that group, but also the individual's experience and perhaps even expertise in a particular area. So it's an individual conversation based on that scenario would be my kind of take on that. So
the lack of Canadian legal experience in the articling state, you shouldn't be, like, it's not top and front and center in a lateral hire, like the hirer's mind.
Well, and it may come into a discussion about what is the appropriate kind of level at which you're coming, or you're kind of lateraling into the firm, right? So there might be discussions about it's going to depend also, were you a litigator versus perhaps a transactional kind of associate or had a transactional practice. So I think there's a lot of nuances to that conversation in terms of where you might lateral in within a kind of laddered year of call discussion. And that's going to be unique in terms of the business needs to that particular firm, as well as your expertise.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak to that? Okay, otherwise, thank you so much. And just like a final, I know we've taken up too much time. Do you have any last minute advice that you can give to the participants so that I can hand over to GLT to close?
Just one piece of advice for students, especially if they're looking in the Calgary market. I just wanted to remind students that the Law Society has really sort of focused on core competencies in order for you to get called to the bar. So this is an opportunity for students to be creative. Law firms are only one avenue for you to complete your articles. There are composite articles, there's in-house counsel, like where they've taken on articling students. So think about being creative and knowing that there's not just one avenue in order for you to become licensed as a lawyer in Alberta. You can get creative in terms of what that could look like, and working with the Law Society of Alberta to sort of be able to put that together for you. So just know that there's many avenues in order for you to get called to the bar.
Thank you.
One piece of advice from me, I agree with Kimberly, be creative. One piece of advice from me would be memorable, because this articling search is a marathon, not a sprint. And I always tell everyone, you will get articles, not if, when. You will get it. So be memorable, because somebody is going to speak about your search to another person, and there has to be something the person needs to remember about you to just recommend you to the next person. So be memorable, and it will work.
Thank you.
Yeah, just my one piece of advice for, when you're at the part when you're applying, I know we touched on the cover letters a little bit and making sure they're personalized, making sure your resume is personalized. But one other thing, at least for firms, and again, I haven't hired in government, I haven't hired in-house, so I can't tell you for sure. But in firms, we really stress legal writing being clear and concise. So your cover letter is a writing sample. So don't give me a flowery, poetic cover letter. Show me that you can write clearly and concisely and tell me who you are. Okay. So take that opportunity, because I can tell you, I've been reading a lot of very flowery cover letters from law students right now. And I'm like, who gave this person a thesaurus? Please take it away. So, if you can take that opportunity in that cover letter, don't be shy about really polishing that up, making it as clear and concise as possible, but while still telling me who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Kimberly, do you want to give last minute advice?
Oh, I mean, I think so much has been covered. There was a great piece. I did see one question about NCA backgrounds and such, and consistent with some of the advice I gave earlier is know when you're eligible to enter into a licensing stream, but also put that information up front. Effectively make it as easy as possible for someone reviewing your resume to know, your qualifications and whatever's needed, whether it be an equivalency piece from transcripts or even including your assessment for your NCA. So I absolutely encourage candidates to include that information, have it up front, and it should be part of your qualifications.
Thank you. Shell, do you have last minute advice?
I'd just say that, the pandemic initially was a bit of a discouragement for job seekers everywhere, not just articling students. And I'd just like to say that it's no longer as dreary as it was, at least at the start. Firms, organizations are hiring. Put out your applications, do your as much as you can, write what you should be doing. And really it is not a matter of if you will article, it really is a matter of when. But don't let the pandemic cripple you or put you in a hibernate mental state, right?
Thank you very much. So I'm going to hand off at this point to Global Layers. I just want to say thank you again to all the panelists, and I'm so sorry we took more than the 1 hour we promised. We really apologize for that. Now over to the GLC.
Thank you very much, everyone, the speakers and the moderator, for a very wonderful session. I would like to, invite the Vice President to give the vote of thanks. Kenny Folari.
Thank you so much, Dio. Wow, I would personally like to say that I've gotten very comfortable to remote interviews, and I really can't imagine going through physical or in-person interviews anymore. I mean, the time it takes for you to get on the bus or your car and drive down to downtown, the anxiety builds up and all. So that isn't there anymore. So I really like this new normal. Special thanks to all our speakers today for the important insights that you've shared to all our participants. We are very grateful that you took the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We had over 90 participants join us here live on Zoom, and several others connected to the event via Facebook Live and YouTube. We have already started receiving positive feedbacks, and we have you to all thank for that. I also like to appreciate our quintessential moderator for a great job well done. Thank you so much, Chi. We reached out to you on such a short notice and you answered our call. We are indeed very grateful. To all our participants, thank you for joining us today. We hope you've learned a great deal, and if you're unable to get to your questions, we do hope we have other opportunities in the future to chat about them. From the entire GLC Calgary board, I'd like to say thank you to everyone, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.